ready to ditch that screen fatigue, but still love living in the future.
I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it is all about zero UI. Not getting rid of tech, but, making it more like magic.
More like magic.
Yeah, like super intuitive. We are close to a world where your devices anticipate your needs.
It's interesting, right? We've become so used to screens being the middleman between us and our devices.
Totally.
But what if we could, interact with technology more naturally, more intuitively?
You mean like something straight out of a sci-fi movie? Sign me up for that.
The problem that Zero UI is trying to solve.
Yeah.
It's not about getting rid of screens altogether, because, let's be realistic, those screens are everywhere these days, but it's more about changing how we interact with them.
Okay, so less about ditching the screens and more about ditching the endless tapping and swiping.
Exactly.
So how do we do that?
Well, the term itself was actually coined by Andy Goodman.
Right.
And it basically means moving beyond, those traditional graphical user interfaces. So think about how we interact with our computers and smartphones now.
Mm-hmm.
Icons, menus, buttons. It's all very visual and very reliant on that screen. Zero UI aims to minimize that reliance and make our interactions more seamless, more intuitive.
So less about clicking through menus and more about talking to our devices.
Exactly. Voice is going to play a huge role in Zero UI. You're already familiar with voice assistants like Amazon Echo and Google Home, right?
Of course.
They use what's called natural language processing, or NLP, to understand what you're saying, and natural language understanding, or NLU, to actually grasp the meaning behind your words. Well, it is getting better all the time.
Sure.
But voice is only one part of the puzzle. Zero UI also includes things like gestures. Think about the motion controls on gaming consoles.
Oh, right, like the Xbox Kinect.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in ages, but it makes sense. Waving your hand to navigate feels so much more natural than, like, fumbling with a controller.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be those big, obvious gestures either. Google's Project Soli uses radar to detect subtle hand movements above a device.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so imagine adjusting the volume on your headphones just by, rubbing your fingers together. That's the level of precision we're talking about.
Okay, you got my attention. So we've got voice, we've got gestures, anything else up Zero UI sleeve. What about situations where talking or waving my hands around isn't exactly ideal?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Let's talk about the power of context.
The power of context. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. Because I'm all for ditching the screen, but I'm not quite ready to hand over my brain to my devices yet.
Right. No, I hear you. Don't worry. It's not about mind reading.
Okay, good.
At least not yet, anyway. It's really more about your devices understanding your needs based on your situation. You know how your phone just seems to know when you're about to leave work and offers you traffic updates?
Okay. Yeah, it is kind of creepy how well my phone knows my routine.
It is, but it's also incredibly convenient. And that's context in action. Your phone is recognizing these patterns in your behavior, your location, the time of day, even things you typically do, and it uses that information to figure out what you might need before you even have to ask.
So it's not just about me telling my device what to do. It's about my device learning to anticipate what I need.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what makes Zero UI so powerful. Imagine a world where your refrigerator orders groceries before you run out, your car automatically adjusts the temperature to your liking, or even your smartwatch reminds you to take a break based on your stress levels.
Okay, that does sound pretty cool. Less like I'm constantly ordering my devices around and more like having a super efficient assistant who just takes care of things.
Huh.
But how does this actually work? We talk about like AI, machine learning.
You got it. AI and machine learning are really at the core of what makes Zero UI tick. These technologies can analyze huge amounts of data, your usage patterns, your preferences, even your environment, to create a really personalized experience that feels seamless and intuitive.
So the more I use my devices, the better they become at anticipating my needs. It's kind of like training a puppy, except hopefully my phone won't chew up my slippers in the process.
Hopefully not. But you've hit on a key point. This tech is always learning, always evolving.
So it's getting smarter all the time.
Right. And as it gets smarter, we're going to see even more impressive, more intuitive applications of Zero UI.
So where else are we seeing Zero UI popping up? What are some real-world examples that our listeners might recognize?
Well, Tesla cars are a really good example of Zero UI in action, from voice commands for things like navigation and climate control, to the way the car can automatically adjust its settings based on your preferences. It's all about creating a really seamless and intuitive experience even when you're driving.
Right, and I've even heard they're working on more advanced features,
Yeah.
like the car being able to read your mood and then adjust the music accordingly.
Yeah. It's wild. It's all about using technology to create this like hyper-personalized and intuitive experience. And this isn't just happening in cars either. Think about the Apple Watch as combination of voice control, haptic feedback, and that real contextual awareness. It's a huge step towards a zero UI world.
That's true. I barely even use the touch screen on my watch anymore. Just a few taps here and there, but mostly I use voice commands. And the notifications just seem to know exactly what I need at the right time. But it seems like it's still early days for Zero UI. What's next? What's coming down the line for this technology?
Well, we're already starting to see glimpses of the future with things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Imagine a world where you're interacting with holographic displays, using only your gestures, or learning a new skill through a VR experience that feels incredibly real and immersive.
Okay, now that's just cool. Holograms, VR, that feels real. It's like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
I know, right? But that's the thing about technology. What seems impossible one day is totally normal the next. As these technologies keep getting better, they're going to open up all these amazing new possibilities for how we interact with the world around us.
It's exciting, but kind of mind-blowing at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, where does it end? Are we all going to be walking around with chips implanted in our brains, controlling everything with just our thoughts?
Well, brain-computer interfaces are definitely an area of active research. We're not quite at the Matrix level yet,
Okay.
but there are actually already devices that let people with paralysis control prosthetic limbs with their minds, which is amazing.
Wow, okay, that's technology that could really change people's lives.
Yeah.
But for those of us who aren't cyborgs yet, what does a world with zero UI everywhere actually look like? What are some big changes we can expect? It's almost like this zero UI is going to completely change how we think about reality. No more clunky interfaces, just, interacting with tech naturally.
Exactly. It'll just be there when we need it. Imagine classrooms transforming into these really convincing virtual environments.
It'd be like stepping right into a history book or something.
Right. And with the advances in haptic feedback, those environments could be so realistic you might not even know difference. You could feel the weight of a Roman sword or run your hand over a dinosaur bone.
Wow, okay, now that's just cool.
Yeah, and think about what this could mean for healthcare.
Like what?
Well, surgeons could use those haptic suits to perform procedures remotely with incredible precision. Or patients could get personalized treatment plans based on data from their wearables. It'd be like having a doctor monitoring you around the clock.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it. But let's be real. Every coin has two sides. With all this talk about intuitive tech and everything being so seamless, it's kind of hard not to wonder about the downsides.
It's a great point, and one we should definitely consider. Like any really powerful technology, there are potential problems to watch out for. We've talked about privacy a bit already, but I think that's a big one. If these devices are constantly trying to figure out what we need and collecting information on our habits, how do we make sure all of that is protected?
Yeah, it's like that old saying, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. Are we giving up our privacy for convenience?
It's definitely something to think about. We need to be asking some hard questions about things like data security and how companies are using our information. And of course, strong regulations to protect user privacy.
Nobody wants zero UI to turn into Big Brother UI, right?
Exactly.
It's our data, it's our lives. We need to be in control.
I completely agree. And this is why it's so important to have these conversations now, while all this technology is still being developed. We have a chance to do this right, to make sure zero UI makes our lives better without putting our values at risk.
It's exciting, for sure, but there's still some uncertainty there. But like we've been talking about today, zero UI has the potential to change everything. From the way we use our phones to how entire industries operate, it's clear things are headed in a whole new direction.
A direction where tech fades into the background, blends seamlessly with our lives, and helps us achieve more than we could before.
Definitely a future worth exploring.